This track is really about policy, culture, and kind of your procedures and protocols as it goes with credit for prior learning. We felt this was an important one. It kind of goes down to basics for your district and your college as you may see and you may want to see what the overarching policy and regulations are. I'm going to speak to a few things in my first few slides, and but I'll put source material into the chat for you to use at a later basis. I'm sure there's going to be some crossover with Chantee and Bob, as well as Brent's presentation, but we want to make sure you have enough source material that you can, you're not going to digest it in this 50 minutes. We may not have time for kind of an interactive dialogue, but you can bring it back to your CPL team and your board policy administrative regulation folks at your local campus after the fact. So our presenters here today, we're going to have Chantee Guiney, as you met earlier. She stepped in for Dr. Aisha Lowe, and Bob Quinn. If any of you are in AO or the transfer world, you've seen Bob over the years in a lot of those distributions and presentations. Bob is, like I'm a gadfly in the veteran space. He's a gadfly in the transfer space. So we're happy to have Bob around. Dr. Brent Foster, you saw him in the welcome as well. He's the Assistant Vice Chancellor at the at the Cal State Chancellor's Office, and an Army vet himself. It's great to have a Fullerton rep in the house. We're covering a little bit about board policy administrative regulations and code that dictates that. I will share after my portion, as I said, I'll add into the chat a repository, a collection of the military CPL and your CPL policies at the MAP cohort colleges. What we try to do at the MAP initiative is collect things throughout the state that are open source and open that up to others in the state. So you can see what your peers are doing, what their regulations are, their administrative regulations, so you can mirror or find the pitfalls that came with their policy. So I'll post that into the chat. Talk a little bit of Ed Code Title V, alignment. Dr. Foster is going to speak more to the Executive Order 1036 and the implementation at campus by campus basis, as I spoke to earlier in the general session. And then we'll talk about the dreaded CalGETC and anticipated changes and things that we need to consider moving forward. I know that's going to be fun. All right, basically, what we want to emphasize here, and we are advocates of the military articulation platform, but there's also tests and College Source. There is ACE has a repository as well. We have other avenues like Assist. San Diego State has TAP. We have all these different mechanisms for repositories, but the technology solution it merely follows your business. It should follow your business practices and your protocols. And those business practices and protocols should follow what your campus or system culture is, right? You have a culture that should lead into business practices. There should be an alignment there. And my argument here is that culture should follow your institutional values. As Dr. Green spoke to earlier, if your institution does not explicitly value reentry students, reentry adult students, if we are only looking at our traditional track students from high schools, you will see that in your technology solutions, your business practices, your campus culture, because your values are not aligned with that. So the two big questions I have, and you can share in the chat if you'd like, or you can just ponder on these as we go through, is what are your institutional values as it relates to non-traditional students? What are those values with non-traditional students? The students that come back at 30, at 40, as Dean Brown explicitly described her story, right? What are your values at your institution? Some folks may not want to display that, but some may want to brag a bit. The second piece is, are we truly open access? Are we a higher education system for all Californians? What does that mean? What does that mean on your campus? What does that reflect in your outreach team? Does your outreach team go to your local high schools, or do you engage your big corporations in the local area that maybe have folks that have top-ended out at the cashier level but could be managers that need to skill up in their profession? So what does open access mean? How is that reflected at your institution? I think those are important questions as you evaluate your values as an institution. All right, I will put the references to these within the chat box as well. There are a few guiding, and this is just a few, guiding legislative or executive order pieces that have come about. And, I do want to give kind of the accolades to President Barack Obama with his executive order on principles of excellence for student veterans. There was a big push for upfront evaluation of credit for prior learning, but also educational planning, that you must not nefariously recruit on military bases. You must be transparent in the coursework that a student must take if you signed on to President Obama's executive order. I believe that was back in 2012. It was the infancy of the Forever GI Bill. Senator Raw, Assemblywoman Cervantes had major bills that impacted what we did. I spent many a day with Chantee and the folks up at the Chancellor's office dealing with 1071. And I think we came to some great common ground as it changed Title V and our policy movement.
Supporting the core commitments. You can see highlighted there goal number 3, decreasing unit obtainment for a degree. By all means, that is a huge plus with CPL. And it's also called out in our CPL statutes, which I'll get into in my resources slide towards the end. But by all means, Member Cervantes and also Member Roth, when they were very thoughtful and diligent in crafting these statutes to support CPL, there was a clear need, underscored emphasis on decreasing unit obtainment for students as they access CPL opportunities. In terms of the CPL policy implementation timeline, myself and also I know Terence was also part of the initial work group that we had back in 2019, and also many practitioners and leaders from the field as well, from colleges and districts, and also our intersegmental partners. So back in 2019, when some of the statutes, particularly Member Cervantes, her bill, and also Member Roth, their bills to support CPL statutes were sort of just coming into fruition. We quickly mobilized practitioners system-wide to develop a advisory committee to help to craft what's now the regulations, the amended regulations that expanded CPL system-wide. So previously, for those of you that have been in the system for a while, in Title V, Section 55050, previously and for decades, CPL was sort of narrowly limited to credit by exam. That was sort of the one flavor we had to offer students with credit for prior learning. With the amendment of the regulations to radically redefine and reimagine what CPL is, and still looking at what all it could be as we continue, that advisory committee that we had back in 2019, they again were instrumental in helping to expand and innovate those regulations and expand CPL beyond credit for prior learning. In spring 2019, the Academic Senate, their practitioners were also monumental in helping to develop faculty discipline crosswalks, which are still informative today as we look at recommendations from ACE and also other bodies such as CALE, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, on articulating pathways for CPL, and also by all means our colleagues from MAP, from Norco College, with the MAP initiative as well. But just great advancements in articulations to support CPL in the alignment of crosswalk system-wide. Around fall of 2020, the Chancellor's Office, following the implementation of the Title V regulations, we adopted a system-wide policy memorandum to support CPL. Also released with that memorandum was a informative toolkit developed by Palomar College, another just phenomenal leader in the CPL space system-wide. Palomar was actually funded with a grant to sort of begin early to implement, to innovate, and to pilot a lot of what came out of the amended Title V regulations. So again, just our hats off and ever grateful to the Palomar College team, the entire leadership team, Dean Nicole Rowe, Candace Rose, Ben Mudgett, and the entire Palomar team for their work and their continued efforts to innovate and to lead in the CPL space. And towards the end of 2020, also in alignment with Title V recommendations, or I'm sorry, Title V requirements, districts were also required to submit policy certifications to the Chancellor's Office to certify that they do in fact have policies for CPL that are in alignment with the amended Title V regulations. Proud to announce that all districts, with the exception of Calbright, I think there are a district that were exempted from these requirements, but all other districts have submitted their policy to the chancellor's office. We're still in the process of working with a few districts to kind of fine tune some, just either due to administrative changes or leadership changes over time, kind of fine tune some final areas on the policy certifications, but all districts have at least submitted. So that is very encouraging and great news to know that districts are looking and getting critical attention to CPL policy reform. Moving forward to 2021, we had a number of work groups to help to support CPL. And also, as I'm proud to share today, I see the great work that our Norco College colleagues are doing with the MAP initiative, and also all of the colleges that are part of the MAP initiative, and that work continues to date. So just kudos and just accolades to all the practitioners that are putting into practice, helping to shape and putting into practice policy reform in that space as well, with the various CPL work groups and efforts. We also have a grant that's funded and supported through our IEPI division at the Chancellor's Office. That's also leading a more so of a professional development framework for CPL system-wide, but definitely looking forward to great fruits from that labor as well, from that work, to be able to enhance and support CPL system-wide. Okay. Just wanted to give a quick overview or share just sort of quick highlights on CPL local implementation support. So as I mentioned, the Chancellor's Office, we had released resources such as the policy framework to support the amended Title V regulations, guidance memorandums. We also have access to the Vision Resource Center, which also has a CPL community forum within that, within the VRC, a great space to just, talk and to, I would say, to fellowship on all things CPL with fellow CPL practitioners system-wide. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the VRC, in addition to community college, our internal system, it also allows access to external partners as well. So we might perhaps see our intersegmental partners in that VRC space as well. And just all the merrier to help enhance the robust discussion and resources around CPL. As you're well aware from the great introduction we had this morning from the Norco College president and also our Norco leaders as well, the Norco CPL MAP platform to help to support a framework for a technology platform for CPL. Looking forward to great things that are still yet to come from the MAP initiative, great things I've already developed and also on the horizon. It's very exciting to think what it could do to move the needle system-wide with CPL platforms for colleges and districts. As I mentioned earlier, also the Academic Senate, the great work that they're doing with the disciplines crosswalks, and also aligning those as well to recommendations from national credit for prior learning and also prior learning assessment advocacy groups as well. The Palomar College Toolkit, the great innovations Palomar College is doing with their toolkit, and also just as we sort of, work out and release the regulations for Title V, those amended regulations, and just kind of looking at things we didn't foresee or things that we're learning along the way. So definitely looking forward to the great work that's forthcoming from as we learn and go forward, and the ripple effects throughout the system to help to enhance and improve the toolkits and all of our resources moving forward. So on that note, and I put it in bold there to emphasize and to underscore just all of the emergent strategies to support CPL. Again, it is by all means an equity imperative at the forefront and centered in all things equity. So the more that we could do to support local implementation through policy and practice, professional development, that's a big space as well for CPL. That would be all the great to improve system-wide implementation. I thought this was a great infographic to kind of just a big picture view of sort of all of the cogs and the widgets that are in the process wheel for CPL. And I would argue you can actually probably just take this and use it in a lot of spaces as we innovate, not only in CPL, but other areas for adult learners to access continuity in their education as well. So I think this will be a great infographic. It's actually adopted from there was a Career Non-Credit Institute some time ago. But I think, as I said, it could definitely sort of, in terms of a big picture view of the just what all is required to move the needle across campuses with CPL. I put in the bottom there the ongoing evaluation the ongoing aspect of this work that we kind of learn as we go. Again, as the Title V regulations were released, and we're seeing now just areas that we might go in, or actually that we do want to definitely go back and perhaps either take a closer look at perhaps amending or fine tuning certain areas of policy to help solve problems and to ensure that our students have access to CPL.
Hey, Chantee, if I can jump in real quickly there, because I think it's one of the elephants in the room for a lot of the AOs, and it is that I believe it's section D, where the first sentence speaks to course for course within the catalog, and then later, I think the third or fourth sentence speaks about general ed or elective credit. And so there's a significant dialogue over the last couple of months between the ASCCC, the Chancellor's Office on clarification memo versus opening up Title V and making changes. Know that discussion is going on because some of the campuses are just a little bit weary of giving a general ed credit or elective if there isn't course for course equivalent. I'm not to say one way or the other. I have my own personal perspective on the flexibility in the writing, but I do understand some hesitancy at the colleges. So that is there, and there is dialogue going on. And as Chantee was kind of hinting at, I'm just going to grab the bull by the horns and say, yeah, there's some confusion there from some of the campuses, and we're aware at the system level, we're people are dialoguing about that. That other Cal GETSI, the new GE, is kind of overtaking that discussion because we need to ensure that whatever fix we make will be in alignment in a year and a half, 2 years down the road when we have a new general education pattern. So we have a few things that there's a lot, the systems are speaking with each other. I'll put it that way.
Thank you so much, Terence. Absolutely, I agree. And thank you. I just want to just take a moment also just to recognize and thank Norco for mobilizing and leading the practitioners in the CPL work groups, and bringing that forward to the Chancellor's Office as you hear about sort of developments that are happening within policy. And you're right. We'll decide. By all means, Dr. Lowe, she, and Executive Vice Chancellor Marty Alvarado, they will ultimately consult with the system and also consider whether or not to perhaps release clarifying guidance. I'm sort of a long-term. Kind of long-term strategic thinker. So, I think guidance memos are great in the short term, but if there's something that we need to do, I think to maybe further innovate in the policy space, that way where we actually have, firm policy in place, then, that's we'll consider as well. But thank you though. Thanks for sharing those concerns. And by all means, I'm fully confident that we'll work with, we'll consult with our system stakeholders to reach the best solutions possible to keep equity at the center in CPL. Okay, so I think on that note, my last slide here is wanted to share resources. Again, I'm sure it's, a lot of you know by now from Ed Code, sort of our the what kind of prescribes like what we shall do. Like I think of Title V as our how, sort of how we're going to come about and to do it. So those are great resources to, if you haven't by now, to bookmark definitely within your browsers. And also, as I mentioned before, the Palomar College CPL Implementation Toolkit, that is on the Vision Resource Center, as well as our the Chancellor's Office periodic memorandums that we released for guidance with CPL, or forthcoming guidance as well. By all means, the Vision Resource Center would be a great sort of one-stop shop for all of those resources. And also I put a link here to some great articles, a previous article from a couple years ago from CC Competes, titled Credit for Prior Learning, Leveraging Past Learning to Close Present Day Equity Gaps. Great perspectives on sort of nationwide advocacy groups on the benefits of CPL. And then also, of course, our Vision Resource Center, which has the CPL Community Forum. We've created it, it's by practitioners for practitioners. So if you haven't done so, highly encourage you to connect in that space to stay abreast of CPL conversations, or also just opportunities or innovations or perspectives from other colleges perhaps that may be walking through the same sort of implementation opportunities or challenges in CPL as well. So on that note, Terence, I will stop screen share and transition back to you. And
Thank you so much, Chantee. And it's great to have the Chancellor's Office partnering with us on the campus level. We do want to hold all questions till the end. Do feel free to put any question that comes up in the chat box so we can hopefully address that. You're used to hearing from Dr. Marshall Thomas, and in years past, Vice Chancellor Melissa Levitt. She's retired. Marshall is pulled away at a net ally, so Brent's running mate over here is not with him. So Dr. Foster is going to present on behalf of the Cal State system, and we're going to talk a little bit about policy with the Cal State system. We have about 15 minutes left. If there's any meat left on the bone at the end, we'll take some questions. Otherwise, please do put those questions or concerns in the chat box. Brent?
This morning, as I was revisiting the session, I looked again at the topic, culture, policy, and procedure. Reminded me of something I heard recently someone say. They said, culture will eat strategy for lunch. And it is really true that until you change the culture at the campuses, they'll keep doing whatever they're used to doing. And we are really at the CSU not yet in that space by which we are ready to totally change the culture. We're moving in that direction. So we're more in the policy and procedure mode right now. So let me share a little bit about what's going on. Currently, the CSU policy, I'll say current, it's been changed for a year, but this is the umbrella policy from the system level that's been now sent to the campuses, and they are working on their versions of campus policies that align with this. Now, if you ever need to look for policies at the CSU, I'm sharing this because you can just go to what's called PolStat, and you can do word searches, but that's just a side note. This is our policy here, and I'm going to kind of give sort of an overview of some of the areas. Now, many of the campuses already had a military CPL policy in place, as you can imagine, both for federal and state expectations. This new system level policy addresses 4 types of CPL. Your traditional examinations from CLEP, AB, or AP and IB. And then obviously over in the corner here, military experience. But the 2 kind of new ones are the experiential learning and the industry or workplace credentials and certifications. So I'll just kind of go through those briefly. So credit for exams like AP, IB, and CLEP. I know that in the Chancellor's office, you guys are probably getting your door knocked on as well by Cambridge International. They're reaching out to me on a weekly basis because they want in the game to be accepted as well. But these are pretty standard. They're built into our policy and into the culture in a lot of ways across the campus. So these are what we might call the low-hanging fruit. Demonstrated learning, this is probably a little bit new for most of the campuses. I liken this to something like if you could imagine someone coming to your campus having worked in the theater for 15 years, but never really having any formal education. Maybe they're an actor or a director or a stagecraft and lighting, but they have skills that they've learned over those experiences. And they could come in, and you're not going to have them taking Theater 101 because they've already got that figured out, 10 years ago. So we're looking for ways to provide opportunity for CPL with those kinds of students. And this new policy is demanding that. Now, credit for prior learning with regard to traditional higher ed or outside of traditional higher ed, like certifications, trainings that maybe happened on the job. Again, I don't need to go into great detail. I suspect all of you totally understand what kinds of scenarios those would involve. And then finally, the military credit. And again, I won't spend much time with this either because I know that this group is likely very clear on this. However, I will share one quick example. We often are referring to it. I'm glad Sam didn't when he was talking earlier, but we often refer to all military people coming in as veterans. And that is a little bit of a an issue, because as my own son experienced, he is still in the Army Reserves. He went to a CSU. They kept saying, well, go to the Veterans Resource Center. And he's like, well, I'm not really a veteran. And he'd show up and they'd be like, well, where's your DD 214? And he's like, well, I'm still enlisted. And there were just a lot of questions that he experienced, and blurry spaces where we're referring to him as a veteran when he's really not. So I'm just mentioning that as a side note. And the other side note is that as a result of his situation, he never received any credit for his basic training, because the campus he went to did not understand that they were supposed to assign some Area E credit for his. So by the time he was a sophomore, he had already satisfied Area E in another course, and the ship had sailed. Current implementation status, again, the big picture, the big policy is out there. The campuses, 21 to 23, are still in progress on their updating their campus policies. In fact, I'm meeting with them at 1 o'clock today, and there will be a session that we're going to talk about with credit for prior learning. Where are you at? Because these things obviously don't happen overnight. They have to work with committees and all kinds of people. And then they come back and say things sometimes like, boy, this is an unfunded mandate. And you have to say, well, but it's important. We've got to change our culture. We've got to help these students, and it increases the efficiency to their graduation. Again, a lot of them had military credit policies, so they're kind of building on those. And then during last summer, we had a group come in called CALE, and they did some piloting with about 4 or 5 of our campuses to essentially do something. Well, they did workshops and also other meetings, but they did something called process mapping, similar to what Chantee had up on her second to last slide, where it's basically a graphical representation of an organization's process. What is the process by which, you know, if a student comes and says, I have an experience or I have military background, what is the process the campus engages in? Because I think a lot of times, and most of you should understand, somebody may know this stuff frontwards and backwards. And if the student winds up with that student or with that individual, that advisor, they get great advice. They get told exactly what to do. But that advisor may move on, and you got a new advisor in the house, and now that person doesn't know what the process is. So this map, we're hoping, will help anybody that steps into those roles be able to help a student. Now, I won't expect you to be able to read these. I only put them in here kind of as a visual aid. This is sort of the kinds of things that they came up with. A student's admitted, are they a veteran? Yes or no. Now, where does it go from there? And again, I won't go through all the details. In this case, once again, use of the word veteran, but what if they're an active duty person? You know, even these kinds of little blurry edges. But this helps, as you're aware, that it's not just the Veterans Office or the advisor that is involved typically in credit for prior learning. And so in this example from one of our campuses, they reference admissions and all of these potential processes and offshoots of what a student or what that request might go through before it's finalized. You know, and if you look at that, you think, gosh, that's a lot. You know, does it really need to go through this much of a pinball machine? And this is another example, before a decision is made. And so again, the culture needs to shift, and we need to, I think, go with the low-hanging fruit, at least for a start. I attended a meeting with Terence and Sam and Calvin and others, where I really got interested in something that the CSU was utilizing that I really wasn't that familiar with, called TESS. It was mentioned earlier in an earlier session. Many of you may know about it, and forgive my naivete about it. I'm only just learning, but I am, you know, definitely all in, leaning into this, because what I am learning is that some of our CSUs are using TESS very effectively and very transparently, and others are using it, but they're not transparent, and others are not using it very well. So what we'd like to do, in fact, I met with our articulation officers just last week, And I'm meeting again this week with others about supporting some training. TESS College Source is the company that owns TESS, and it is available on all the CSU campuses. And what I'm really interested in, it's an articulation tool, but I think it's also a space by which credit for prior learning could be auto-loaded in there to create sort of system level articulation agreements that reduce, if you will, let me back up one, reduce this kind of complexity to an agreement and just make it more about one arrow over. Basic training equals 3 units of area E. And yes, I know area E may not have a future. So we'll talk about that. TESS, this was an example from our colleagues at East Bay. They use TESS very effectively. You can see how much easier this kind of graphic is in terms of the process by which, in this case, it's once the TESS identifies that basic training equals area E, it doesn't need to be done every time a student comes. Now they just know a student has basic training, they get qualified for area E, it's put on their degree audit without any further consternation about it.
Brent?
Yes.
Before you move on, as you talk
Well, this is my last slide, so I'm actually, I'm over, and we can open it up, and I'll stop sharing. But I can back up if you wanted to see that slide.
Oh, no. This is perfect. We only have 4 minutes left, so I was giving you a time warning.
Absolutely. This is it. So I appreciate this work. We are knee deep in it. We are attempting to, let me stop sharing here, to bolster credit for prior learning. And I really appreciate what's happening at the community college level, and certainly open to any questions you might have.
Yeah, let me start out and then we can jump it into the field. I love the idea of transparency and open source with tests or with whatever mechanisms used, but a tech tool where the public can see what those articulations are. By and large, that's for lower division transfers or direct applicants to the CSU. Those that come through the community colleges, as I look at that Executive Order 1036, Article 4, Section 2B, I believe it is, where it speaks to if you are CSU certified, CSU GE certified, if you have an ADT, those credits are respected as long as the community college has done the review and transcribed that credit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that's a big concern of a lot of the community colleges is what happens with our transfers and how do we deal with it at our level so we can get them up to that ADT before going to San Diego State or Cal State Fullerton.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we've talked about this, that it's closing in on 90% of our veterans and military students wind up at the community college first. And so it is important for the community college to be doing their due diligence on this for our military folks, because the percentage that comes straight to the CSU is much lower.
I do want to thank them. Having folks at their level come in and speak with us in the field is exceptional. Please do, if you need to funnel some of the questions to the MAP cohort or MAP initiative to get them to the system offices, please do engage. I highly recommend with this Cal Getsy thing coming up, which from a legislative perspective, 30,000 foot looks great. Implementation, it's a little hairy. Give your input. The ASCCC has asked multiple times for surveys. Give your input on Area E, give your input on the need for kinesiology and athletics and PE, your feelings on typically the transfer track to CSU with a different type of math that's non-calc based. Give your opinions on those things so we still have open doors to the Cal State for our students in the community colleges. All right, guys, if there isn't anything else for the good of the order, let's hop on over to the main session and we'll see you in your next session in the other tracks. Brent, Bob, Chantee, thank you guys. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.